With Capcom Cup 11 finished, Season 3 is just around the horizon. So I thought to myself, which character in the 2 years we've played Street Fighter so far has not been able to win a big tournament? Well, while we're at it, I thought it's also worth checking which characters have won the most of these big tournaments. So what exactly will we consider a big tournament? Well, on this Liquipedia page, I'm going to go with the Tier 1 tournaments. These Tier 2 tournaments have some stiff competition for sure, but for the sake of this video, I want to see the top level competition where we have players from all over the world coming, no holds barred, you know, bringing out the big guns. A lot of the tournaments in these Tier 2s are more regional, either literally regional finals for the World Warriors or just tournaments that have mostly local players. And although these tournaments do have a high level of competition, I thought it was more interesting to see which characters are reaching kind of the pinnacle of Street Fighter 6 over these first 2 years. Now, I do want to say this isn't supposed to be a commentary on the balance or supposed to be a tier list. A lot of the events we're going to be looking at are a few patches removed, so their character strength doesn't even matter anymore. It's mostly meant to be an interesting look at the history so far, and if your character doesn't show up at all, you could say you're working too hard and you're playing some honest Street Fighter while everyone's using these carried ass characters. I'm kidding, it's just the history part. It's worth noting that we won't be counting Street Fighter League finals because those are team tournaments, kind of a different beast. So that means our sample is exactly 30 prestigious Tier 1 tournaments. So before we talk about the characters who have never won one of these big tournaments, let's talk about the ones that have. Before we get started, let's test your Street Fighter 6 competitive history knowledge. I'm going to spoil it now. There's 10 characters out of Street Fighter 6's 25 character roster who will not make this list. Try your best to guess as many characters as possible that will not make the list in the comments below. Our first one is Marisa, which is pretty surprising because she's often considered one of the worst characters now, maybe even the worst by some players. But her win was back in July 1st to 2nd, 2023, where Big Bird won Red Bull Kumite 2023. This was the second tournament on this list. Marisa's obviously fallen off quite a bit since then. People have become better at fighting her, as well as the meta of Street Fighter 6 kind of developing in a way where she cannot abuse. But either way, she did make the list, so good stuff to Big Bird. Next up, we have Lily. This one is also very impressive, as I believe she's been buffed since this win. And this win was at Combo Breaker 2024 in the hands of El Chicote. I've also heard El Chacote, I don't know, but what a sick win that was. This has been Lily's only appearance in a win for these tournaments, but even at the time, it was incredibly impressive and that would not change today. Our next character, who also only has one win, is Ryu. Despite an incredible performance at Capcom Cup 11 in the hands of Blauz, Ryu is actually a character that was super surprising to see do well before Capcom Cup 11. And that was the case at the time in September 15th, 2024, when Kusanagi won Ultimate Fighting Arena 2024. The opinions of Ryu will likely change in the coming weeks, but you really have to give credit to Kusanagi, who won this tournament, as well as Blauz at Capcom Cup, who took a character that a lot of people wrote off as just a weaker version of other characters and really put them on the map. Also, with one single win, this is very surprising to me, we have M. Bison. I guess it's not that surprising because he's relatively new, but a lot of people have this character as one of the best in the game, even after his nerfs, so I expected him to have quite a few showings already. His one win was in the hands of Xiao Hai at Esports World Cup 2024. Just a week before that, we had Ed win the Last Chance Qualifier for Esports World Cup. Now you might be asking, what is the Last Chance Qualifier doing on these Tier 1 tournaments? Well, let me tell you, it was stacked. This happens to be Ed's only win as a secondary or a main, which is also very surprising to me. A lot of great players picked up this character. He did get nerfed quite a bit, but still a lot of great players are continuing to use him, so I do expect him to show up on this list more often in the future. Okay, and our last character with one win is actually Dhalsim in the hands of Mr. Crimson at Ultimate Fighting Arena 2023. This was also incredibly impressive at the time and still is to this day. A lot of people not only consider Dhalsim to be on the weaker end of characters, he's also one that kind of has to work for his wins. He doesn't really have the explosiveness that a lot of other characters had, so the mental fortitude that Mr. Crimson needed to win this tournament was probably pretty high. Okay, so let's move on to characters who have had 2 wins total. And at 2 wins, we have Cammy, and they're both in the hands of Punk. But it is worth noting that both time he won, he pulled out a secondary Akuma. Now, Punk is very well known as Cammy being his bread and butter, but the Akuma actually does come out in important sets. In fact, his win at CEO 2024 against DCQ, he was in the losers bracket, used Akuma in grand finals, reset the bracket with Akuma, and then he also won grand finals 3-0 with Akuma. But either way, his Cammy does put in a lot of work in all of these tournaments. So she gets on this list with his 2 wins with her. Also at 2 wins, we have Jury. One was the $1 million tournament itself in Capcom Cup 10 in the hands of Uma, and the second was in August 20th, 2023 at Versus Fighting 11 in the hands of Ricky Man's Barnett. I hope I said that right, probably didn't. And speaking of characters who have 2 wins and also winning $1 million tournaments, we have Kakeru's JP. JP has won 2 tournaments in Gamers 8 and Capcom Cup 11, both of which had $1 million prize pools were won by Kakeru. If you're gonna pick 2 tournaments to win with JP, those are good ones. So let's move on to characters who have won 3 of these tournaments. First up, we have Zangief, who has actually won in the hands of 3 different players. The first time was on July 14th at Topanga Championship 5 in the hands of Kobayan. The second time he won was August 24th, 2024 at Cream City Convergence in the hands of Mena RD, while he also used his secondary Blanca. And then pretty shortly after, at East Coast Throwdown 2024, Itabashi Zangief won Zangief's third big tournament over Idom in the final. Another character with 3 wins that you're probably not surprised to see on this list. In fact, I would imagine he should be even higher, but he only does have 3, and that is Akuma. Surprisingly enough, the only time Akuma has won as a main was Shuto's win at CPT Singapore Super Premiere. The other 2 times Akuma shows up on this list is what I mentioned earlier. It was in Punk's 2 wins as CEO 2024 and Evo 2024, where although he mostly used Kami, he did bring out the Akuma. So as 2 of these were a secondary, Akuma has actually only solo won a tournament 1 single time, which is very surprising. This is another character a lot of people are very confident in putting in the top 2, top 3, maybe even top 1 on their tier lists. I imagine he will show up on this list much more often as time goes by, unless a Season 3 patch changes a lot. Speaking of characters a lot of people are confident in putting at the top of their tier list, we also have Rashid with 3 wins. 2 of these wins were by Gachikun, once in October 22nd, 2023 at the Singapore Offline Tournament, and the second time at DreamHack Dallas 2024. Right after DreamHack Dallas, Big Bird won DreamHack Summer 2024, which is pretty funny since Rashid won 2 back-to-back Super Stack tournaments but hasn't shown up since. Again, barring major changes, this is a character I would imagine most people believe will show up on this list much more in the future. So with our characters who have 3 wins, we move on to 4, but there actually isn't any. The next best character has won 5 times, and although in a vacuum it sounds pretty surprising, when you remember Mena RD played a lot of Blanca, you wouldn't be that surprised. Blanca has 5 appearances, although he is listed as a secondary 3 different times. His first appearance was the first major on this list in CEO 2023, where Mena RD won with Blanca and Luke. Problem X then won Capcom Cup X Last Chance Qualifier, an incredibly stacked tournament where he won over Punk in Grand Finals with solo Blanca. We then have Mena RD winning Red Bull Kumite 2024, Evo Japan 2024, and Cream City Convergence 2024. In one of these tournaments, Blanca was listed as a main, and the other 2 he was a secondary. So out of Blanca's 5 wins, he was a solo main once, a main with a secondary once, and then a secondary choice 3 other times. And let's move on to characters with 6 championship runs, in which we have Luke. Some of the tournaments I just mentioned for Mena, he also used Luke, such as CEO 2023, as well as Red Bull Kumite and Evo Japan. Chris Wong also won CPT 2023 France offline with solo Luke. At Ultimate Fighting Arena 2023, Mr. Crimson actually used Luke as a secondary, and then after the nerfs that Luke got, he's only shown up 1 more time since in the hands of Noah the Prodigy at Blink Respawn 2024. So out of Luke's 6 championship runs, he has 2 times where he was a solo main, 1 time where he was a main with a secondary, and then 3 times where he was a secondary, 2 in the hands of Mena and 1 with Mr. Crimson. And at 7 total wins, can you guess the last character on this list? It is Ken Masters, the worst Shoto in the game. Ken appears 5 times as a solo main and 2 times as a secondary. Well, I guess one's a tertiary, but either way, the first one is Angry Bird's win at Evo 2023. The second one is also Angry Bird at FAV Cup 2023. He then shows up as a tertiary for Punk's run at CEO 2024. Although to be honest, most of the credit of this tournament does go to Kami and Akuma. Either way, Angry Bird then wins the Mix-Up 2024 with solo Ken. Xiaohai uses Ken as a pretty important secondary during Esports World Cup 2024. Tokido then wins CPT 2024 Japan Super Premiere with solo Ken. And then for the last spot in Capcom Cup 11, Armper won Kings of the World with solo Ken. So yeah, maybe not to many people's surprise, Ken does top our list. He's not only the character that appears the most in total, but he is also the character who appears the most as a solo main. And that's the history of characters who have had championship runs throughout the history of Street Fighter 6 so far. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, with Season 3 around the corner, who knows what changes they can make, so we can't do much except wait and see how this will change over the coming year. Okay, so let's talk about the characters who have no major wins, not even as secondaries or tertiaries in the history of Street Fighter 6's Tier 1 tournaments. So with 10 out of 25 characters, that means 40% of the roster has yet to make the list, which I think is pretty good because there hasn't been that many huge events, and it's only been 2 years. Some of these characters are DLC characters, so they probably just didn't have enough time yet. Speaking of which, the first character is Mai Shiranui. She's the newest character, and I believe she's quite strong. With enough time, I would be really surprised if she didn't make this list. Then we also have Aki and Terry. Aki's not all that new, but she's been newly buffed, I guess, relatively recently, and Terry is still relatively new, and a lot of good players are actually trying him out now. So I also expect to see both of these characters on this list in the future. Besides DLC characters, we actually have a few characters who came really close to making this list. And for the characters who were close, we have Manon. As I mentioned earlier, Idom came second at East Coast Throwdown, where he lost to Itabashi Zangief in Grand Finals. A character who I imagine is very surprising to a lot of people to not make this list is Guile, also very close, where NuckleDu came second at Red Bull Kumite 2024. Then we have DJ, another character who was quite strong at the start, got a little bit of nerfs, but still does pretty well. So it is a little surprising that he hasn't made this list even a single time. but ending Walker got pretty close where he used DJ as a secondary during Ultimate Fighting Arena 2023 where he came second. And lastly, we have Chun-Li. Nephew actually used Chun as a secondary during CEO 2023, the first tournament on this list. That was literally the first tournament of the game, so who knows what the meta was like at the time. And I don't even think Nephew used Chun-Li that much at the event, so maybe Chun-Li wasn't all that close, but she's a character I do enjoy watching and I hope that she does make this list in the future. And besides that, we only have 3 characters who are neither DLC nor have come second place at least off our list. The first of which is Kimberly. I actually think Kimberly can make this list in the future, especially if some of the changes people want come to fruition. Kimberly has been getting a lot of traction recently, especially with Team USA's play at Street Fighter League Finals where all 3 of them played her and they honestly all looked very good. I can see Kimberly making this list in the future. Even if it was just as a secondary, I could see Punk pulling it out, but that's not to say that the Kimberly mains can't also just win a tournament outright in the next few years. And then lastly, we have Jamie and Honda, who are the kind of sad stories of this list. I have very little hope for them right now unless they get some major changes. The problem with some of these lists, especially tier lists in general, is that they're very self-fulfilling and that a lot of the best talent around the world, they want to win events. So who's going to put in time to Jamie and Honda, who everyone kind of agrees on is just not that great, or there's just better alternatives? So for that reason, I don't even think they will win in the future unless there's some major changes that make some of the best players in the world want to pick these characters up. But yeah, until we see those season 3 changes, we can't be sure. But they are definitely the biggest losers, I would say, of the first 2 years. Although I guess you could say all of the 10 characters I just mentioned are tied for the biggest loser. But yeah. And that's our list. So what do you think about the characters who have yet to win? Do you believe in any of them? Or even about the characters who have won? Do you think any of them will continue to win even more? Or some of them who have only won 1 or 2 are on the rise? I'd love to hear your opinions. Of course, it is worth mentioning that this game is not just about the characters. It is the players who pilot them. That's the reason I mentioned every single player who piloted these characters to their wins. But in terms of players who have showed up on the list the most and contributed to it, we have Men RD who showed up 4 times and Angry Bird who showed up 3. Which was pretty cool. So yeah, if you enjoyed this little trip through Street Fighter 6's history, would appreciate a like, comment, and subscription. Let me know of any other topics you'd like to see in the comments below, and I'll see you in Season 3 of Street Fighter 6. Stay beautiful, my friends.